"You're fired." The words echoed through the silent boardroom like a death sentence. Grace Thompson stood frozen, unable to believe what she had just heard. She hadn't stolen. She hadn't lied. She hadn't failed. Yet the man she had served faithfully for 4 years pointed to the door, and ended her career in less than 30 seconds. What Grace did next would leave an entire London company speechless, and prove that when you place your pain in God's hands, He can open a door no man can ever shut. Chapter 1. The woman everyone trusted. 4 weeks earlier. Long before Grace Thompson walked out of Collins Global Holdings carrying nothing but a cardboard box. She was the employee everyone wanted on their team. Every weekday, before the first train reached Canary Wharf, Grace was already stepping out onto the busy streets of London. Office workers hurried past with coffee cups in their hands, taxis filled the roads, and the towering glass buildings reflected the morning sun. Among the thousands rushing toward another workday, Grace walked with quiet confidence. She wasn't chasing success. She was walking in purpose. As she entered the 24-story headquarters of Collins Global Holdings, the security guard smiled the moment he saw her. "Morning, Miss Grace." She smiled back. "Good morning, Mr. Harris. God bless you. You always brighten this place." Grace laughed softly before making her way to the elevator. Few people noticed what she did every morning. Before turning on her computer. Before opening a single email. Before speaking to anyone. She quietly placed her small leather Bible beside her laptop. She closed her eyes. "Father, thank you for another day. Give me wisdom. Help me honor you in everything I do. And let someone experience your kindness through me today. In Jesus' name, Amen." Only then did her work begin. Within an hour, the marketing department was alive with activity. "Grace, could you review this proposal?" "Grace, do you have a minute? I need your opinion on this presentation." She never replied with irritation. Never rolled her eyes. Never acted too important. Instead, she stood from her chair, walked to each colleague, and patiently helped them one after another. Her excellence wasn't driven by ambition. It was driven by conviction. To Grace, work was more than a paycheck. It was worship. Her honesty earned the trust of clients. Her humility earned the respect of her colleagues. And her integrity made her impossible to ignore. In 4 years, she had never missed a major deadline. Never received a disciplinary warning. Never been accused of dishonesty. When Collins Global secured one of the biggest international marketing contracts in its history, almost everyone agreed on one thing. If Grace is leading the project, we'll win. But not everyone celebrated her success. Across the office, another pair of eyes had been watching. Nathan Cole, Senior Marketing Manager. Brilliant, ambitious, and dangerously jealous. Every promotion Grace received felt like a personal defeat to him. Every compliment from management became another reason to resent her. As employees applauded Grace's leadership, Nathan quietly applauded something else. Opportunity. Because envy rarely announces itself with anger. It hides behind polite smiles, friendly conversations, and carefully planned betrayals. That same morning, on the top floor, behind the polished glass walls of the executive boardroom, Richard Collins, the founder and CEO of Collins Global Holdings, studied the latest financial reports spread across the conference table. At 58 years old, Richard had built one of London's fastest-growing consulting firms. Investors admired him. Business magazines celebrated him. Employees feared him. He believed one rule had made him successful. Feelings don't build companies. Results do. His executive assistant entered carefully. "Sir, the Hawthorne International executives have confirmed tomorrow's presentation." Richard nodded. "Who's leading it?" "Grace Thompson, sir." "And if we lose this contract?" "It could cost the company millions." Richard slowly closed the report in front of him. "Then we'd better not lose." Outside the boardroom, Grace continued helping her colleagues, completely unaware that a decision made behind those glass walls would soon place her name at the center of a storm she never saw coming. Because sometimes, the greatest betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people smiling across the same conference table. And before this week was over, Grace's faith, her character, and her ability to forgive would be tested in ways she had never imagined. Chapter 2. The Trap Behind the Smile. The following morning, London woke beneath a blanket of grey clouds. Inside Collins Global Holdings, the atmosphere was different. There was excitement. Tomorrow's presentation to Hawthorne International could change everything. Winning the account would place Collins Global among the top consulting firms in Europe. Losing it would cost the company millions, and possibly force major restructuring. Every department was under pressure. Every employee felt it. And no one carried that pressure more than Grace Thompson. She arrived before sunrise, reviewed every slide, checked every financial projection, and personally met with each member of her team. "Let's make sure every detail is perfect," she said with a calm smile. "Excellence honors God." Her teammates nodded. Working with Grace never felt stressful. She inspired people to give their best. From across the open office, Nathan Cole watched quietly. His jaw tightened as another colleague praised Grace. "I don't know how she does it," one employee whispered. "She never panics." Nathan forced a smile. "She's good," he replied. But inside, jealousy was slowly becoming hatred. 4 months, he had expected to be promoted to executive director. Instead, the board had begun mentioning Grace's name. Investors admired her ideas. Clients trusted her judgment. Even Richard Collins had recently described her as one of this company's greatest assets. To Nathan, that sounded like a threat. He wasn't about to let Grace become the future of Collins Global. Not while he still had something to say about it. Late that afternoon, Grace left her desk to attend a strategy meeting on the 18th floor. Her computer remained unlocked for only a few moments. It was all Nathan needed. He glanced around. The office was nearly empty. His heartbeat quickened. With steady hands, he slipped into Grace's workstation. He opened the confidential Hawthorne presentation. Then, he made a series of subtle changes. Critical numbers were altered. Revenue forecasts were manipulated. Key client recommendations were deleted. Not enough to attract immediate attention, but enough to make the presentation collapse in front of Hawthorne's executives. Nathan saved the file, closed the laptop, and quietly returned to his own desk. When Grace came back, everything looked exactly as she had left it. She had no reason to suspect that someone had just planted the seeds of her downfall. That evening, before leaving the office, Grace paused beside the large windows overlooking London's glittering skyline. The city lights stretched endlessly into the distance. She smiled softly. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered. "I've done my best. I leave the rest in your hands." She gathered her bag and walked toward the elevator. She didn't know that behind another window, Nathan was watching her leave. A slow smile crossed his face. "Tomorrow," he muttered under his breath, "everything changes." The next morning, the executive boardroom was filled with anticipation. Representatives from Hawthorne International had arrived. Richard Collins adjusted his tie as the visitors took their seats. "This contract," he said confidently, "will define the future of both our companies." Grace stood at the front of the room. She took a quiet breath. "Lord, guide my words." She clicked the remote. The first slides appeared exactly as she had prepared them. Then came the financial projections. Grace frowned. That wasn't right. She clicked again. Another figure appeared. Wrong. Another slide. Wrong again. Her heart began to race. A murmur spread across the room. The Hawthorne executives exchanged uneasy glances. Richard's expression darkened. Grace's fingers trembled slightly as she stared at the screen. She knew those numbers. She had checked them dozens of times. So, who had changed them? And why? Across the room, Nathan lowered his head, pretending to review his notes. But hidden beneath the conference table, a faint smile crept across his face. The trap had been set, and Grace had just stepped into it. Chapter 3. Judged without being heard. Silence filled the boardroom. Grace stared at the presentation screen. Her heart pounded. Those weren't her numbers. She clicked back to the previous slide. Then the next. Every critical figure had been altered. The Hawthorne executives exchanged disappointed looks. One of them slowly closed his notebook. "I'm sorry," he said. "These projections don't match the documents we received last week." Grace swallowed hard. There must be a mistake. "Please, if you'll give me a few minutes, I can explain." Richard Collins rose from his chair. His voice was cold. "Explain what, Miss Thompson?" Grace looked at him, desperate. "Sir, I prepared different figures. Someone must have." Richard interrupted her. "So you're saying someone sabotaged your presentation?" "Yes, because these aren't my." Richard slammed his hand on the table. "Enough." The room fell silent. "I trusted you with the biggest contract this company has ever pursued." Grace felt every eye fixed on her. She wanted to speak. She wanted someone to believe her. But no one did. One by one, the Hawthorne executives stood. "We appreciate your time," their lead representative said politely. "Unfortunately, we've decided to withdraw from this partnership." Without another word, they walked out. The sound of the closing door echoed through the room. Just like that. A contract worth millions was gone. Richard turned slowly toward Grace. Disappointment filled his face. "I expected better." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "So did I." She wasn't crying because the presentation had failed. She was crying because she knew she had been framed, yet had no proof. Outside the boardroom, employees watched anxiously through the glass walls. Whispers spread across the office. Did they lose the contract? "I heard Grace messed up." "I never thought she'd make a mistake like that." Nathan remained at his desk. His expression was serious. But inside, he celebrated. His plan had worked perfectly. Grace walked quietly back to her office. She sat at her desk and stared at the small Bible beside her laptop. For the first time in years, she didn't know what to pray. Then her phone vibrated. It was a message from her husband, Daniel. "Whatever happens today, remember, God is still writing your story." Grace read the message twice. A slow tear rolled down her cheek. She whispered, "I don't understand this, Lord, but I'll keep trusting you." She didn't realize. The greatest test of her faith had not yet begun. Because before this day was over, Richard Collins would make a decision that would change Grace's life forever. Chapter 4. You're fired. The office was unusually quiet. No one laughed. No one gathered around the coffee machine. It was as if the entire building was holding its breath. At exactly 4:30 p.m., Grace's phone rang. "Miss Thompson," Sarah Bennett's voice came through. "Mr. Collins would like to see you in his office." Grace took a deep breath. "Thank you. I'll be right there." She picked up her Bible from her desk, held it for a brief moment, then gently placed it back down. "Lord," she whispered, "give me the right words." The elevator climbed to the executive floor. With every passing second, her heart beat faster. When the doors opened, Sarah was already waiting. She gave Grace a sympathetic smile but said nothing. Grace knocked softly. "Come in," Richard's voice replied. His office overlooked the London skyline, but today Grace barely noticed the view. Richard remained standing beside the window. He didn't ask her to sit. Without turning around, he spoke. "The board has concluded its investigation." Grace felt a small flicker of hope. Perhaps they had discovered the truth. She stepped forward. "Sir, if you'll allow me, I can explain what happened during the presentation. I know someone changed those files." Richard finally turned. His face was expressionless. "I've heard enough." Grace's heart sank. The company has lost a contract worth nearly £8 million. She tried once more. "Sir, I would never." Richard raised his hand. "I cannot keep someone in this company when I've lost confidence in their judgment." The room became painfully silent. Then came the words that would echo in Grace's heart for years. "You're fired." For a moment, time stood still. Grace stared at him, unable to speak. 4 years. Countless late nights. Missed family celebrations. Prayers before every meeting. All erased by 2 words. She swallowed the lump in her throat. Sir. I've always served this company with honesty. I know. His answer surprised her. I know you've worked hard. Then why won't you believe me? Richard looked away. In business, perception matters as much as truth. Grace's eyes filled with tears. So, this is your final decision? It is. She lowered her head. Every part of her wanted to argue, to defend herself, to expose whoever had done this. But another voice whispered inside her heart. Trust me. Grace slowly nodded. I pray one day the truth finds its way into the light. She turned toward the door. Before leaving, she paused. I hold no hatred against you, Mr. Collins. I forgive you. Richard looked at her in disbelief. He had expected anger, tears, perhaps even threats. But forgiveness? He said nothing. Grace quietly walked out of the office. Sarah was waiting outside. One look at Grace's face told her everything. I'm so sorry, Sarah whispered. Grace managed a faint smile. It's okay. No, it isn't. Grace simply nodded. Minutes later, she packed the few belongings from her desk into a cardboard box. Some colleagues avoided eye contact. Others watched in silence. Nathan stood across the room, hidden behind a mask of sympathy. He smiled to himself. His greatest rival was finally gone. As Grace stepped through the revolving doors of Collins Global Holdings, the evening rain began to fall. She stopped on the pavement and looked back at the building one last time. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Her future had never looked more uncertain. Yet through the pain, she lifted her eyes toward heaven. Father, I don't understand your plan, but I still trust your heart. Little did Grace know, while one door had just closed before her eyes, God had already begun opening another door, one far greater than she could ever imagine. Chapter 5. The Prayer That Changed Everything. Grace sat quietly on the train ride home. The cardboard box rested on her lap. No one noticed the tears she fought to hold back. Outside the window, London's lights blurred into streaks of gold as the train sped through the city. Her phone buzzed. It was another message from a colleague. I'm so sorry this happened. Then another. You deserved better. She read them without replying. When she arrived home, Daniel opened the door before she could reach for her keys. One look at the box in her hands told him everything. Without saying a word, he wrapped his arms around her. For the first time that day, Grace broke down. I did everything right, she sobbed. I worked honestly. I served faithfully. Why would God allow this? Daniel gently held her hands. I don't know why. But I know God has never abandoned those who trust Him. Later that night, after dinner, Grace sat alone in the small living room. Her Bible lay open on the table. She wasn't searching for answers anymore. She was searching for peace. Her eyes fell on Romans 8 verse 28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. She read it again. Then again. Slowly, her breathing settled. She knelt beside the sofa. Father, today, I lost my job. My reputation has been damaged. And I don't know what tomorrow looks like. But if you are still with me, then I have not lost everything. She paused, wiping away another tear. And Lord, I choose to forgive Richard Collins. The words were difficult to say. Every part of her flesh wanted justice, wanted revenge, wanted those responsible to suffer. But instead, she prayed, bless him, give him wisdom, and let the truth come to light in your perfect time. At that very moment, across London, Richard Collins sat alone in his office. The building was almost empty. He looked at Grace's dismissal letter lying on his desk. For some reason, he couldn't shake the memory of her final words. I forgive you. He had fired hundreds of employees during his career. Some shouted. Some threatened lawsuits. Some stormed out in anger. But no one had ever walked away with forgiveness on their lips. Richard leaned back in his chair. For the first time in years, his conscience refused to stay silent. He didn't know it yet, but God had already begun working on two hearts at the same time. One through pain, the other through conviction. And before many days had passed, both of their lives would change forever. Chapter 6. The door no one expected. 3 weeks passed. Every morning, Grace woke before sunrise. Not because she had somewhere to be, but because she refused to let disappointment steal her devotion. She prayed, read her Bible, then spent hours applying for jobs across London. One application after another. One interview after another. One rejection after another. We've decided to move forward with another candidate. Thank you for your interest. We wish you success in your future endeavors. Each email felt like another closed door. Still, Grace refused to complain. One rainy afternoon, as she was about to close her laptop, her phone rang. The caller ID read, Olivia Brooks. Grace. Olivia exclaimed, I've been trying to reach you. Grace smiled faintly. It's been a difficult few weeks. I heard what happened. But listen. I wasn't calling to talk about your old job. Grace frowned. What do you mean? Our company is looking for a director of brand strategy. Grace laughed softly. Olivia, people with my reputation don't become directors. Who told you your reputation is ruined? Grace was silent. Olivia continued. I've seen your work, Grace. I know your character. And our CEO doesn't hire people based on rumors. He hires them based on integrity. Grace hesitated. I don't know. Pray about it, Olivia replied. But send me your CV tonight. After the call ended, Grace stared at her laptop. Could this really be another opportunity? Or was she setting herself up for another disappointment? She quietly folded her hands. Lord, if this door is from you, give me the courage to walk through it. And if it isn't, help me trust your timing. The next morning, she submitted her application. Then she waited. Meanwhile, at Collins Global Holdings, trouble was quietly unfolding. Another major client had withdrawn from negotiations. Investors were asking difficult questions. Employees whispered in the hallways. Richard Collins felt the pressure mounting. For the first time in years, his company seemed to be losing its footing. As he reviewed another disappointing report, Sarah Bennett entered his office. Sir, she said carefully, there's something about Grace Thompson's case that doesn't sit right with me. Richard looked up. What do you mean? I think we may have reached the wrong conclusion. Richard's expression hardened. Then find me the truth. Sarah nodded and quietly left the office. She had no idea that the answer she was searching for was hidden inside a single office computer. And once it was uncovered, everything Richard Collins believed about Grace would be turned upside down. Chapter 7. The Truth Hidden in the System. Sarah Bennett couldn't ignore the feeling in her heart. Grace's dismissal had happened too quickly. For 4 years, Grace had built a reputation that couldn't easily be questioned. Could one presentation really erase all of that? The next morning, Sarah walked into the company's IT department. I need access to the activity logs for the Hawthorne presentation, she told the technician. The young technician looked surprised. Those files are archived. I know. I need every login, every edit, and every timestamp. Mr. Collins didn't authorize this. Sarah looked him in the eye. He did now. An hour later, a detailed report appeared on her computer screen. Sarah carefully read through each line. Grace Thompson. Presentation created. Presentation reviewed. Presentation saved. Everything matched Grace's timeline. Then, one entry caught her attention. 11:42 a.m. The presentation had been opened again. Sarah frowned. Grace had been in a strategy meeting at that exact time. She continued reading. Her eyes widened. The document had been edited using another employee's login credentials. The name on the screen made her heart sink. Nathan Cole. No. She whispered. There has to be another explanation. She immediately requested the security footage. Minutes later, the video appeared. There was Grace leaving her desk.
Moments later.
Nathan walked over. He looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then he sat at Grace's computer. He remained there for less than 2 minutes before quietly returning to his own desk. Sarah covered her mouth in disbelief. The presentation. He changed it. She wasted no time. Grabbing the report and a copy of the footage, she hurried toward the executive floor. Richard Collins was in the middle of another meeting when she knocked urgently. "What is it, Sarah? You need to see this." Her voice was unusually firm. Richard noticed the concern on her face and dismissed everyone from the room. The door closed. Sarah placed the report on his desk. Then she played the security footage. For nearly 2 minutes, neither of them spoke. Richard watched Nathan alter Grace's presentation with his own eyes. When the video ended, silence filled the office. Richard slowly leaned back in his chair. His face had turned pale. Every word Grace had spoken had been true. Every accusation against her had been false. And the woman he had fired was completely innocent. For the first time in his career, Richard Collins realized he hadn't just lost an exceptional employee. He had destroyed the life of the one person who had remained honest to him until the very end. He lowered his head. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, "What have I done?" Chapter 8. The Bigger Door. Richard Collins barely slept that night. Grace's final words echoed through his mind. "I forgive you." Now he understood why they haunted him. She hadn't failed the company. He had failed her. The following morning, Richard called an emergency executive meeting. Nathan Cole was escorted into the boardroom, unaware that the truth had already been uncovered. Richard placed the security footage on the screen. "Would you like to explain this?" Nathan's confidence disappeared. He tried to deny it. Then he blamed stress. Finally, he admitted everything. "I was afraid she was taking my position," he confessed. "I only wanted her to lose the contract. I never thought she'd be fired." The room fell silent. Richard closed his eyes in disappointment. "Your employment with Collins Global ends today." As security escorted Nathan from the building, Richard remained seated, staring out the window. One question filled his heart. Will Grace ever forgive me, after what I've done? Across the city, Grace sat in the reception area of Sterling Vision International, one of London's fastest-growing consulting firms. She wasn't nervous anymore. She had already surrendered the outcome to God. After a series of interviews, the company's founder entered the room with a warm smile. "Miss Thompson, we've reviewed your portfolio. We've spoken to former clients. And we've seen the leadership qualities you bring." He paused before extending his hand. "We would be honored to have you join us, as our new Director of Brand Strategy." Grace blinked in disbelief. "Director?" The founder smiled. "With a salary nearly twice what you earned before." For a moment, she couldn't speak. Tears filled her eyes. Not because she had found another job, but because she had just witnessed the faithfulness of God. The door that had closed had made room for one she never imagined. 2 days later, a black car stopped outside Grace's home. Richard Collins stepped out. When Grace opened the door, surprise filled her face. "Mr. Collins." Richard lowered his head. "I didn't come as your former boss. I came as a man asking for forgiveness." He explained everything. The investigation, Nathan's confession, the security footage. Then he said the words he should have spoken weeks earlier. "I was wrong. I judged you without hearing you. I deeply hurt you. I'm sorry." There was a long silence. Richard expected anger. He expected rejection. Instead, Grace smiled gently. "I forgave you the day you fired me." Richard looked at her, stunned. "You already forgave me?" Grace nodded. "If I had carried bitterness, I would have missed what God was preparing for me." Richard's eyes filled with tears. "I'd like you to come back. I'll restore your position and increase your salary." Grace smiled with gratitude. Thank you. But I can't. Richard looked confused. Why? Because God has already opened the door he wanted me to walk through. She wasn't rejecting him. She was embracing God's greater plan. Richard extended his hand. This company lost an exceptional employee. Grace shook his hand warmly. And today, you found something even more valuable. Humility. Richard smiled through his tears. I think you're right. As he walked back to his car, he looked toward the sky for a long moment. For years, he had trusted only his business instincts. That afternoon, he whispered his very first sincere prayer. God, teach me to lead with wisdom and with grace. Months later, Grace stood before a team of hundreds at Sterling Vision International. She wasn't simply leading a department. She was leading people with integrity, compassion, and faith. Every time someone asked how she had overcome losing everything, she gave the same answer. When one door closed, I thought my story was over. But God was only turning the page. Sometimes the greatest blessing isn't the door that stays open. It's the one God allows to close. Because behind that closed door may be a future greater than you ever dared to imagine. And for those who choose forgiveness over revenge, faith over fear, and trust over bitterness, God still has a way of opening doors that no one can shut.